Hi everyone, welcome back. And this week's question of the week in the Building a Neuro Ninja in Life program is all about how we can fight that feeling of demotivation we're all experiencing right now. So, habit 3, beating back meh. And meh is defined as that kind of feeling of can't be botheredness, that huge level of demotivation that we might feel. So we're going to look at today how we can respond and manage our day to get the most out of every single day. So are you feeling meh? Lots of people are right now. It's really difficult situation in the midst of this lockdown. It's dark, it's cold. It's a much different situation than it was during the March lockdown. In fact, there was quite an interesting study just published last week that just looked at how people are spending their time this lockdown. They're working more, they're stressing more, they're exercising less, they're doing some of the things that they did for the first time in lockdown, the new things, they're doing those things much less as well. So let's define meh. It's basically indifference, that kind of sense of what's the point. I do really care, but I just can't get my motivation up to do anything about it. So feeling demotivated, flat, and wondering what the point of all of this is. Or, and lots of young people would attest to this, putting off what we know we should do right now because we can't really be bothered right now. We know we should do it. We've got those deadlines. We've got that homework. We've got that coursework that needs to hand in, but we just can't be bothered because we're kind of stuck in a set of unstructured days, and it's really difficult to get ourselves motivated. So what can we do about that? That's what this video is all about. So procrastination is, as one student said to me a couple of weeks ago, it's basically the act of ruining your life for no apparent reason. I know what I should do. I've got everything I need to do. Why can't I do it right now? So in this presentation, we're going to be looking at why so many of us are feeling like that right now and what we can do about it. First of all, we need to be really clear about the fact that physical and mental health are the same thing. It's really important to understand that our brain builds our mind, and our mind needs routines, and our mind needs novelty, and there needs to be a balance of 2/3 routine to 1/3 novelty in order to get a basic structure going that supports motivation, productivity, and well-being. So it's really important to understand that we've got two nervous systems. Yeah, I know, nobody told me either. We've got a react nervous system that gets us ready for action. That's called the sympathetic nervous system. And a respond nervous system that calms us down and enables us to rest and reflect. That's called the parasympathetic nervous system. Now, in times such as these, when there's a lot of uncertainty out there, we don't know when this lockdown's going to end, we don't know when normal school, college is going to start up again. There's a lot of uncertainty. Uncertainty can pitch our brain into that react nervous system. We should be living in those nervous systems in a balanced way. 30% react system. Ultimate version of that is our fight, flight, freeze response. 70% parasympathetic nervous system. So our react system comes on when we've got to perform, when we've got to respond to a test, when we've got to deliver a piece of work by a deadline. It gets us ready to do stuff, and it makes us alert and helps us kind of focus in. But the ultimate version of that, the fight, flight, freeze response, can really place us in a moment of adrenaline, cortisol, kind of quite stressed out. Unfortunately for all of us, the react nervous system comes on when we're experiencing uncertainty, and there's a lot of it out there at the moment. So the react nervous system increases our heart rate and blood pressure, heightens our alertness for a period of time, stops digestion and repair, makes our breathing rate shallower and quicker, narrows our focus and attention to deal with whatever the issue is. And that's fine for short bursts, 4 or 5 hours a day, fine. But actually, with the level of uncertainty, we can find ourselves stuck in the react nervous system, and that's where the problem starts. That balance I talked about, 30% calm down system, respond system, 70% react system, that reflects the balance of the Stone Age. Life in the Stone Age was mostly boring. There was terrifying moments of a lion coming over the hill to attack our tribe, or the tribe over the hill coming over and being warlike. They were extremely frightening moments, and then it was mostly boring. Nowadays, we've got plenty of volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. Loads of VUCA, and that sets off the same stress system as a lion does. And that means that we can end up exhausted and feeling very sort of foggy in the head, not able to focus, because our stress system has got jammed on. And those negative emotions can be really exhausting. So we need to get in our parasympathetic nervous system. That slows our heart rate down, reduces our blood pressure, opens up our thinking, repairs our body, restores our mind. And we need to get ourselves from the anxious space to the calm down space. Ask yourself the question, where are you? Where have you been this week? Where do you want to be? How are you going to get there? Well, let's look at how we might get there. Our brain builds our mind every day. There is no boss circuit. There is no place, one place, that's completely in charge. However, the front part of their brain, behind the prefrontal cortex, is the bit that calls the brain to order. The brain is like a hall full of noisy, loud people. Look at all those people without masks on. This photo was clearly taken at a time before social distancing. Our brain is full of circuits, and all of those circuits have got different jobs. They're constantly having conversations with each other. And in order to get us to do anything, the prefrontal cortex behind our forehead has to call the whole noisy hall of the brain to order. So the bit of the brain that does that is the bit behind our forehead. And just like John Bercow, the ex-Speaker of the House of Commons, the prefrontal cortex calls the brain to order and says, "Oi, we're going to do this now. We're going to do this now." And if there aren't routines, deadlines, times in the day we're going to sit down and do things, the prefrontal cortex is going to struggle to do that. We're most effective in terms of getting stuff to happen when we're in our response nervous system. So when our prefrontal cortex is underpowered, it's much harder to get ourselves motivated, which explains why we're all finding it much harder to get things done right now, because our prefrontal cortex is experiencing issues because we're stressed. We're feeling overwhelmed with the level of uncertainty and the annoyance and upset about the disruption to our normal life. We're kind of quite stressed about that. Other things that can affect the prefrontal cortex is when we're in pain, when we're carrying lots of emotional pain, when we're worried about somebody else, when we're tired. All of those things affect our motivation. So how can we get stuff done? We need to look after the prefrontal cortex's ability to manage the rest of the brain. And we do that by making sure we get good sleep, making sure we exercise often. That builds connections between the prefrontal cortex and the rest of the brain. We do chores and have two tasks, helping our prefrontal cortex call the rest of the brain to order. We have routines and we make plans. How does making a plan or having a deadline help the prefrontal cortex? Basically, it creates a moment where the prefrontal cortex can say, "Oi, guys, be quiet. We're going to do this now." Let's talk about moaning. Do you moan? I bet you do. Every human brain moans. So let's see why the brain moans. Remember, our brain's main job is to spot problems and solve them or avoid them. So there are problem spotting circuits deep in our emotional brain, and they're alerted first to any change in the world, and then they try and alert the rest of the brain. They do that with those very loud emotional thoughts we've talked about, cognitive distortions. They also do that by moaning. So what moaning is basically a process of the brain spotting a problem and then getting involved in the process of beginning to solve that problem. The trouble with moaning is that only 10% of moaning is productive. The rest is other brain circuits taking a view on a situation and offering an opinion that's just not helpful. They don't have a solution. The solution-focused circuits are in our prefrontal cortex. So we can't stop moaning completely, but we can ask ourselves 4 quick questions to get to the crux of the issue that's triggering the moan. What's the problem beneath the moan? Do I have the information and resources to solve this problem? So do I know what I've got to do in relation to that work? Do I know when the deadline is? Do I know who to ask if I'm stuck? Do I need someone else's help? And what, when and how do I solve this particular problem? If you haven't got those solutions yet, then write the questions down in terms of particular areas that still need answers, and that should help reduce the level of moaning. Habits can also help us be productive and get more out of every day. Deep in the brain, linked to the prefrontal cortex, is a structure called the dorsal striatum, and that is the habit hub. When we have a routine, the prefrontal cortex can give the job of starting that routine to other bits of the brain. And that's really important to understand. So that means that when the prefrontal cortex has trained the dorsal striatum to do that habit, it doesn't have to initiate the habit itself. So that saves it energy. A habit has a cue, a routine, and reward. So any repeat process can become something the dorsal striatum does instead of the prefrontal cortex, saving the prefrontal cortex for other harder situations. Basically, we've got a choice. We have a decision to make every day about how we're going to act. We need a day that's 2 parts routine and a plan and 1 part novelty, new stuff. And we can change our mind about developing these skills to support our productivity, go about building those routines, which changes our brain, which then changes our world. And to build a new habit, you just need to book a time in your day when you're going to initiate the new habit. It can be a small habit. Ideally, it should be a small change in your response. Building that plan every day, choosing a time to enact the new habit, repeatedly enacting it, giving an opportunity for the front of your brain to hand over that habit to the lower bits of your brain, so you can then save the prefrontal cortex for other more difficult activities. And don't forget, the well-being rocks are fundamental to daily well-being. If we're going to be productive every day, we need to build in our well-being rocks. We can't control anything but ourselves, but slowly but surely we can design days through careful planning that have got routines that support our prefrontal cortex to get our brain to do what it has to do at certain points, and then we can build in novelty that will give our prefrontal cortex and the rest of the brain the break and the opportunity for rocks and engagement and creativity that it needs as well. It's all about finding a balance. Don't forget, you've got everything you need at the top of your neck. Try these things slowly but surely. Build plans, rely on routines to build those habits, and make sure you put a dash of novelty in every day to help build your motivation.